You know, I've been around for a while. Met some interesting people. Done some crazy things. So you just might think that there's not much that can take me by surprise. You'd be wrong. The world is full of stories, science, and things that amaze and confound me. Every single day, incredible mysteries that keep me awake at night. Some I can answer. Others just defy logic. Do monsters exist? In West Virginia, a town is terrorized by a 7-foot winged demon. Did it cause the death of 46 people?
It had 2 huge black wings and no head, no arms.
In Newfoundland, a macabre creature washes up on a local beach. Are our oceans concealing a megabeast?
It was nothing that either of us had ever seen or could imagine.
And in New Delhi, thousands are attacked by a metal-clawed monster. Was it a man or a beast?
People ran off in absolute panic. They just were fleeing from the scene.
Yeah. It's a weird world, and I love it. You know, I just had a lovely holiday in Scotland. Edinburgh Castle, bagpipes, the whole deal. Even went to Loch Ness, where Nessie, famous Loch Ness Monster, is supposed to live. We got on this boat, went out on the loch, searching for hours. Then guess what I saw? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Total waste of time. And $6. Are monsters nothing more than bait to lure gullible tourists? Do things like Yeti, Bigfoot, and Chupacabra exist? I got news for you. They just might. Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Nearly 50 years ago, this sleepy farming town was brutally awoken by a series of monstrous events that are still a mystery today. Lorne Coleman is an author. He documented the incidents, which began on the night of November 15th, 1966, when 2 young couples took a drive.
Roger and Linda Scarborough and the Mallets were driving around in the old TNT area. It was called TNT because that's where dynamite was stored during World War II.
Secluded and dark, TNT was also a well-known lover's lane. But instead of fun, the 4 teenagers are about to encounter a living nightmare.
All of a sudden, they see this creature that's 6 feet tall, and it's coming to them. It's having glowing red eyes in its chest, which are reflecting the headlights. It had 2 huge black wings, no head, no arms. All of a sudden, it goes into the air and starts flying. They started racing back to Point Pleasant, and the creature was in back of the car. Really, they felt it almost was touching both sides of the highway. Red glowing eyes, no arms, just these huge wings.
Reaching speeds of 100 miles an hour, the chase continues until finally the creature disappears. Was there something unpleasant in Point Pleasant?
The next day, they come back out there and they see it flying overhead. So all of a sudden, you get more and more kind of word of mouth in the town that this creature's been around, people are seeing it. The newspapers hadn't even caught on to the reports yet. So the next day, you have Marcella Bennett saying she's going over to one of her relatives' houses, which it's a bunch of houses right along a road that leads to the TNT. She gets close to the house and all of a sudden on the roof of the house sees the Mothman. She's carrying her baby in her arms and falls on the baby. out of terror and fright, gets up, races off, and they tell the police too. What occurs, however, is that it's then that it gets into the newspaper, and all of a sudden you had, within a few weeks, 200 people saying that they'd seen the Mothman.
This remarkable story sends shockwaves through the town. The media calls the creature the Mothman. Local resident Fay Laporte was 14 years old at the time. 3 days after the first sighting, she decided to visit the scene for herself.
That's the road over there that we drove down, me and my brother, to come out here to try to find the so-called Mothman we heard about. My brother said, well, I'm just going to see if I can find it and prove that it's just somebody in a Halloween costume or something on wires or something. As we got to the area, my brother kept looking past me to the window. I said, well, what is it? What are you looking at? He said, well, don't look right now. He said, but there's something beside the car there by the window. So he slammed the brakes on, and just like it was nothing, just leaped right up on the car. Even though it was dark, you could still see the eyes. The eyes held me. The most red, I can't explain the red. It just was such a red that I just can't describe. It's just like a color that it looks like they're really lit up, but it's not a glow, but it's perfectly lit up that you cannot miss it. And it's like, that's all you see when you look at it. It had the features of a bird combined with a human. We were really scared, and I was begging and crying for my brother to go ahead and let's get out here. That's when I finally saw it open up its wings and just flew off in the sky so pretty, and it was gone.
For the next year, the Mothman terrorizes the people of Point Pleasant.
We were coming up the road here, and we looked around the curve there, and we thought it was a car light. So we stopped the car, and the thing came over top of the car.
Well, I just think it's something supernatural that we can't explain or something like that. I know I can't explain it, that's for sure.
They wonder where it will all end. 13 months after the first sighting, they get their answer.
The Silver Bridge between West Virginia and Ohio, starting at Point Pleasant, collapsed on December 15th, 1967. 67 people fell into the water of the Ohio River. 46 died, and 2 bodies never were even found.
There's seemingly no apparent reason for this horrific tragedy. Then comes a terrifying report. The night before the disaster, the Mothman was seen hanging from the Silver Bridge.
And people were scared. They were so scared they didn't want to talk about the bridge, they didn't want to talk about Mothman, they didn't want to talk about anything. This town became quiet. And everybody for a long time said that nobody talked. And you still have people that won't talk about the bridge collapse today.
The Mothman was never seen again. For 45 years, this incredible story has baffled experts. But some believe recent evidence could finally explain the mystery of the Mothman. Joe Nickel is a paranormal investigator with Skeptical Inquirer Science magazine.
We human beings misperceive all the time. People say, I know what I saw. Actually, they know what they think they saw.
Joe believes the Mothman wasn't quite the monstrous beast it was made out to be.
I believe the barred owl is the creature that most clearly fits the bill.
Was the Mothman simply an owl? Nickel thinks the answer lies in Linda Scarberry's first descriptions back in 1966.
Her original description of Mothman is of a very large, winged creature. She said it had no neck, virtually no real head, just eyes, very large eyes, round and shining like a bicycle reflector. In the owl family, there are different degrees of what's called eye shine. Among the most potent is that of the barred owl, which has a deep crimson eye shine. It's a large owl with big wingspan. It would look like just eyes set at the top of a body with wings up. It flies in a silent moth-like flight. It has pretty much exactly the characteristics of Mothman, the original sightings.
But does Nichols' theory explain the height? Eyewitnesses reported a creature that was 6 or 7 feet tall.
We know that people misperceive, and I'm quite confident that somebody looking and not knowing what it is at night quickly and maybe being frightened by it, I dare say I would misjudge the distance and therefore misjudge the height. Keep in mind that the barred owl does not fly around with a yardstick in its claw for measurement purposes. So if you're looking at it and you don't know what it is, because it's a funny looking creature, so I think that people misperceived the distance and therefore misjudged the height. And they were excited and they kind of focused in on it, and that also made it loom large in their consciousness. Barred owls were at the site. This was the McClintock Wildlife Preserve, overlaps with the TNT area, and there were barred owls in that area. So I would say this in summary: if it looked like a barred owl and acted like a barred owl and had red reflector eyes, maybe it was a barred owl.
Incredible, isn't it? Here we have an entire town in fear of their lives from something that can't explain, a creature 7 feet tall that can fly 100 miles an hour and maybe even bring down a bridge, and they blame it on this guy? Don't get me wrong, he's scary if you're a field mouse. Perhaps the real question here is, why did so many people think they saw a monster and even blame it for the death of 46 people? Weird or what? A psychologist believes there's one sure way to solve the mystery of the Mothman: using fear.
We're going to try to induce a mild case of mass psychogenic illness.
I feel like someone is following me.
A mysterious winged creature called the Mothman terrorizes a town in West Virginia. Is it proof that monsters exist? Jim Hurat is a psychologist. He believes the Mothman can be explained by a phenomena called MPI.
Mass psychogenic illness, or MPI, is a psychological term for an outbreak of mysterious illness that has no medical cause, but it's entirely in someone's head. Before you know it, you have a contagion effect, whereby those social symptoms start spreading in a large group of people. Mass psychogenic illness tends to be associated with negatives because people oftentimes report and care about and give a lot of credence to dramatic things in the environment. And oftentimes, just from our evolutionary standpoint, those are dangerous things, negative things. So when it comes to illness, that's something we want to avoid. So if we see someone get sick, that grabs our attention. Just like when we see something that might be paranormal, that grabs our attention too.
Was Mothman the result of social contagion? Huron believes he can prove his theory by showing what might have happened in Point Pleasant.
We're going to try to induce a mild case of mass psychogenic illness. I've selected a group of volunteers. I'm going to give them the suggestion that they're going to be visiting a very haunted place in the woods. We're going to take them out there and let their imaginations take over. What we should see, if mass psychogenic illness is a plausible explanation for the Mothman sightings, is that we'll see a few people start having experiences, other people will notice that, and then we'll see an outbreak of similar symptoms, if that's what you want to call them, just due to social pressure.
Was this fact? Was this fiction?
Huron begins by telling the group he needs their help to solve a series of disturbing paranormal incidents reported in the area. As night falls, the group sets out into the woods.
Everyone stop, please. Everyone fan out.
They are told to turn off their flashlights.
And stop.
From this point, they can only be turned on when someone thinks they experience something paranormal.
Just get your sense of bearings.
In just minutes, flashlights come on, and reports of paranormal activity flood in. Horn believes the flashlights act as social cues, which influence the other members of the group.
Felt a cold breeze before the wind started blowing.
You felt a cold breeze? Someone felt cold over there too.
I feel like someone is following me and someone is just waiting to say something. Like static electricity on my face.
Let me understand this. Like right here, you feel like there's static electricity on your face? Is it as soon as one or two cues took hold, then you start seeing a flurry of other flashlights going on. It percolated throughout the entire group. Exactly what we would expect with psychogenic illness in a group. Tonight's experiments were very impressive because it kind of confirmed what I think happened with the Mothman. That is, we had the right type of people in the right type of environment, an environment that was spooky, full of context, exactly the same kind of environment that the Mothman experiences happen, and a little bit of suggestion caused a flurry, an outbreak of experiences that otherwise wouldn't have happened. It's exactly what I thought happened with Mothman.
Was the Mothman all in the minds of its victims? And does this explain what eyewitnesses like Faye Laporte saw? Ken Gerhardt is a professional monster hunter. He believes the best way to solve the Mothman mystery is to hunt it down himself.
For the past decades, I have gone out and searched for hard physical evidence that we share our world with creatures, legendary beasts, things that have not been classified or verified by scientists. Mothman is a monster in the truest sense of the word. I mean, here you have a creature that doesn't match the description of anything we know about in the natural world. Something that seemingly stepped right out of a science fiction movie. Mothman's main motivation seems to be to chase and terrify people, and possibly leave a path of destruction and devastation in its wake. There are many people who blame Mothman for the collapse of the Silver Bridge and believe that there's actually a death curse associated with the Mothman. So I would say yes, Mothman is the ultimate monster.
Gerhardt has come to the McClintock Wildlife Reserve, close to where the Mothman was first sighted.
It's very exciting to be here in the actual location where Mothman was reported so many times back in the 1960s. If Mothman is a real physical animal, it's going to make an impact on its environment. And this could be tracks on the ground, nests, markings, and the like.
Using a camera trap, Gerhardt is hoping to catch Mothman unaware.
This is actually a motion-activated camera with an infrared beam, and anything that passes within that beam is actually going to be captured on this particular camera. I can put the camera out overnight and come back the following morning to determine whether, in fact, I've captured an image of the subject.
To attract his prey, Gerhardt sets up a blasting device, a machine that broadcasts the sound of forest creatures in pain.
Many of the eyewitnesses said the Mothman made kind of a squeaking mechanical mouse sound. And fortunately, I have a little sound on here called lip squeak. And I think that's exactly what we need. Did you hear that? Something moving around there in the brush. I don't know what it was, but basically that last sound definitely evoked some type of response or reaction.
With his equipment set, it is now a waiting game. Will the Mothman reveal himself? I don't know about you, but if I were a monster hunter, indeed, if I were hunting the Mothman, I think I'd be taking something a little more substantial than this. I mean, at least I think you take something like this. Wouldn't you? But we have to ask the question, if monsters really exist, why has no one, monster hunter or not, been able to catch one? Then again, if monsters were just ordinary critters, they wouldn't really be monsters, would they? Returning the next day, monster hunter Ken Gearhart checks to see if he's found evidence of the Mothman.
Huh. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't look like we got anything on film. I may have been a little bit wrong about the placement of this camera. Lesson learned here is that monster hunting is a very arduous and time-consuming process, and it may take quite a bit of time before we actually get an image of our quarry.
The high-tech approach has failed to find anything, but Gearhart thinks he knows exactly what Mothman is.
I believe Mothman to be the product of negative energy. Consider for a moment the main location where Mothman was encountered. Many of the Native American tribes would avoid this area completely because they believed it to be haunted by monsters and evil spirits. And then you have the great curse of Chief Cornstalk, the Shawnee chief who, on his deathbed, cursed the area because the white men had betrayed him. So in that respect, I believe Mothman to be the accumulation of all of this negative energy, perhaps brought to life by some type of mechanism far beyond the realm of human comprehension. Beyond that, there have been reports of winged humanoid creatures all over the world for centuries. And in many ancient cultures, for example in Japan, where you have the Tengu, which is a birdman, the Tengu is often considered to be a bad omen or a harbinger of doom. You have the Banshee from Scottish lore. And so in many of these mythologies and folklores, these winged creatures are often considered to be premonitions of doom and destruction. So I think that's a very interesting tie-in between Mothman and the timing of the bridge collapse.
Was Mothman a bad omen that somehow materialized in Point Pleasant? Or could it simply have been mass hysteria created by an owl? Weird, or what? A fisherman finds a giant, unidentifiable creature on a beach in Newfoundland.
It was nothing that either of us had ever seen or could imagine.
Are monsters lurking in the deep?
Ah, hey, whoa. You know, I used to love fishing. Nothing better than the thrill of landing a big one, the ultimate challenge between man and beast. Well, every now and then you catch something you're not expecting. Strange things that make you wonder, what is living in the depths of our oceans? I don't know. In 2001, Gary Stenson was working as a fisheries officer in Newfoundland, Canada, when he received the strangest phone call of his career.
Got a call from a fisherman. He was telling me about a creature on a beach that had washed up. He started to describe it to me, and it sounded unlike anything that I had encountered.
Mystified, Gary decides to meet the fisherman and investigate the strange sighting.
It was a very isolated area, and as we came up to it, we saw this large creature laying on the beach itself. I've never seen anything that looked like this. The whole thing was tapering to the tail end, and once it got to the tail end, it just broke off. We had thought that it might be something like a giant squid, which we do have here, but there are no tentacles that look like that. It didn't also look like a whale or a shark, which it could be. There was nothing that looked like a head. There was nothing that looked like any sort of structures that we could identify it.
In over 20 years as a fisheries officer, Gary thought he had seen it all. Until now.
I've worked on a lot of whales, and I've worked on a lot of seals, and even some sharks that have come ashore, but this creature was nothing like that, and there was nothing that we could tell where it came from. From a distance, it had what looked like hair standing up all over it. It was about 5.5 meters long, about 2 meters wide, and about 1 meter high in the middle of it. There were a number of lobes. They looked almost like short arms with notches in between. It smelled a lot like rotting tissue. was pretty heavy. We tried pushing on it, it was solid. It was nothing that we could move. So what we did was we took our knives and we tried to cut up and cut into the tissue.
As they cut into the carcass, they made a bizarre discovery.
The exterior of it was very hard. It was quite tough, but there was no sign of any organs. If it was a shark, there'd be cartilage, but there was no cartilage. So we looked for bone. If it was a whale, there'd be some bone in it, but none of this either. We spent a lot of time trying to decide what we thought it might be. And of course, as a scientist, you're very curious. And in fact, that's a sign of a good scientist to me, is somebody who's curious about what they see. And of course, we were very curious as to what this might be. So we decided that the best thing to do would be to take some tissue with it, and we brought that back with us.
It seemed Gary and the fishermen had discovered a creature unknown to science.
It was nothing that either of us had ever seen or could imagine. It's not impossible that there's something out there that we haven't seen before that's lurking in the depths.
A giant creature washes up in Newfoundland. Was it an unknown species or a monster from the deep? And if there was one, could there be others? Remarkably, the answer is yes. It's incredible. In the last century, giant weird blobs of, I don't know what, have been washing up all over the planet. Are they something awful from the bowels of ships? I hope not. In fact, they're so hard to identify that the only name scientists could come up with is globsters. Part glob, part monster. Globster. Clever. But what the hell are they? Matthew Adele is a professor of anatomy. He believes the explanation is simple.
It sounds like something very mysterious, something completely unknown to science. There are dozens of reports of globsters from around the world going back over a century. They're usually formless and they don't contain any bones. There's no evidence of a head or a tail or any limbs. They're just big, shapeless globs of flesh. But there's no evidence so far that they're anything other than dead whales.
But if globsters are whales, how could tons of bones and internal organs be missing? Waddell thinks the answer lies in one of the strongest elements in nature, collagen, a protein found in whale skin.
Collagen is similar to steel in terms of tensile strength, so it's one of the toughest substances known to man. If you feel the back of your heel, feel your Achilles tendon, that's a big rope of collagen the size of your finger. Now imagine something like that woven in overlapping belts around an animal 100 feet long, and you get some idea of the strength of whale skin. It's just incredible.
Scientists think protective collagen allows whales to dive up to 2 miles below the surface of the ocean.
Many submarines would crush before they got down to that depth. Collagen is their pressure suit when they dive and their armor against things like sharks that would try to take bites out of them.
Waddell also believes collagen causes whales to decompose in a unique way.
Decomposition for whales is an interesting process because whales are different from other animals in 2 ways mainly. The first is that they're so big, just their sheer scale influences how they decompose. The other thing is the skin of whales is unique in the animal kingdom. It's incredibly thick, it's incredibly strong. You can hang up the entire weight of a whale by a hook through its skin. When a whale dies, the skin doesn't fall apart the way that normal animal skin does.
After death, scavengers rapidly devour the insides of a dead whale. But they leave the gristly collagen alone.
And once animals have eaten their way into the body to get the good stuff, it's easy for the bones to slide right out and sink to the bottom of the ocean. The skin falls off like a sock off of a foot. And now you have a 100-foot-long tube of skin floating through the ocean.
But many globsters have tentacles, strange arms, even hair. Can Waddell's theory explain these bizarre features?
Imagine the gnarliest piece of gristle you've ever encountered that's 100 feet long and a foot thick. It lasts essentially forever. It's only broken up, really, by getting pounded on rocks and torn apart by waves. That sack of skin can float around in the ocean for months or maybe even years. It can rip, it can tear, it can shred into all kinds of interesting shapes. And the collagen actually frays, just like an old pair of pants. And those threads of collagen that stick out are usually pink or red, and they look like hair.
Are globsters simply giant blobs of collagen floating around in a suit of whale skin? Or are they beasts from the deep?
I love a good mystery as much as the next person, and I would love to think that there are giant unknown animals in the ocean, and there probably are some new kinds of sharks and maybe even new species of whales, but there's no real sea monster. As much as I would like to believe that there is, I have to go where the evidence leads, and so far all of the evidence that we have suggests that globsters are just the rotting skin of dead whales.
Are globsters simply masses of mammal meat? Some believe they are proof of something far more terrifying.
It would absolutely be a monster.
Strange creatures called globsters are washing up on beaches all over the world. Are they simply dead whales? Dr. Hans Larsson is a paleontologist. He thinks globsters could be a living relic from our ancient past.
The researchers who point to globsters and say they're nothing more than whales, they're probably right for most cases. But pretty much the entire ocean below 100 meters depth hasn't been explored.
Some areas of the ocean are over 6 miles deep. Larsson believes that a terrifying creature could be lurking in the depths. The megalodon.
Megalodon is a huge fish. It looks a lot like a great white shark, but it's much bigger.
It is known as the Tyrannosaurus rex of the deep, a monster that terrorized the ocean for 25 million years, and the right size for a globster.
This is a tiger shark, about 15 or so feet long, and look at the size of the teeth and the size of the mouth. So it's pretty impressive. I mean, this would be scary enough in the water should you be in front of it. But compare that to a megalodon, and this is an average size tooth. It would absolutely be a monster.
Most scientists believe this marine monster became extinct 1.5 million years ago. But remarkably, Larsson isn't so sure.
Some people have suggested that the cooling of the oceans may have driven Megalodon to extinction. I think we should be a little bit skeptical about that because all the other animals in the ocean survive quite well. And if that whole ecosystem could survive the global cooling of the oceans and the ice ages, why not Megalodon?
Could science be wrong? Another giant of the deep, the coelacanth, was supposed to have died out 65 million years ago with the dinosaurs. But then in 1938, a fisherman hauled one up. Are megalodons alive? Could globsters be washed up remains of a 25 million year old living fossil?
We have glimpses of some other fishes down there, other sharks and other non-shark fishes, but we know practically nothing about them. I think that world is just unexplored. If the megalodon was one animal down there that we didn't know about, there could be a huge range of other animals as well, non-air breathing animals. Things like other squids, other fishes, both sharks and non-shark fishes, other invertebrates. Who knows what other kinds of crab-like animals or arthropods or jellyfish animals are down there. We just have no clue.
Do giant killers lurk in our oceans? Are they monsters of the deep? Or just globs of super strength blubber. Weird or what? In India, a rampaging man-beast causes widespread panic in the nation's capital.
They scream and cry and run off. You know, it was absolute panic.
Are scientists creating man-made monsters? You know, when it comes to trying to prove there's no such thing as monsters, there's one big problem. There's just no hard evidence. They never seem to hang around long enough. But what if we're looking in the wrong places? What if instead of creepy shadows or deep, dark corners of our imagination, the monsters we're looking for are right under our noses? What if we're the ones creating them? Sanal Damaruku is a journalist. He was in Delhi in the summer of 2001 and witnessed one of the most bizarre events in its long history.
It became very, very warm. The temperatures went up to 48 degrees Celsius with enormous humidity, which made life unbearable. Nobody could sleep in home, especially poor section of the town. A lot of people have been sleeping on the rooftop.
As thousands of people try to escape the heat, they have no idea a 6-week reign of terror is about to begin.
2 factory workers said that they have been sleeping on the factory balcony in the evening, and suddenly some strange creature jumped from the floor to the 2nd floor and scratched them, attacked them, screamed and went off.
In a city home to thousands of monkeys, at first the attack seemed unremarkable, until the victims described what they had seen.
And they said that it had 2-3 special things: metallic claws, then a special light coming from its forehead, one green and the other red. And these lights were moving, and it scratched, made a special whistling sound and disappeared. The story was like a wildfire. It spread everywhere. People have been speaking about this special creature.
What had attacked the workers? Within 24 hours, the newspapers give the creature a name: the Monkey Man. The very next night, it strikes again. By the end of the week, there are reports of a dozen more attacks.
People were so afraid. People ran off in absolute panic. They just were fleeing from the scene. They scream and cry, and hearing this sound, people shut off the windows, close lights. You know, it was absolute panic.
All the victims described the same thing: a hairy creature with metallic claws and strange lights.
Everybody has been speaking about this special kind of movement that it has, as if it's controlled by somebody. Some people said that it could be a half-man, half-robot, and especially created by the neighboring country, Pakistan, to make trouble in India.
But then comes a new twist. As rumors grow, so does the panic. Just 2 weeks after the first sighting of the Monkey Man, the entire city of New Delhi is besieged by terror.
So many people have been injured. Initially, every night, we had 5 to 6 people got attacked by the Monkey Man with scratches, bruises, and other body damages. And the number increased. Later, per night, there have been 120, 130, people got attacked by the Monkey Man. And there have been more than 800 people hospitalized at different parts of the time.
Then, tragedy strikes.
One lady was on a rooftop sleeping, and someone saw the Monkey Man, screamed, and the whole people started running off. She had been running off, and she fallen down from the 2nd floor, straight down, hitting the floor, and she died.
In the following days, more people die as crowds rush to escape. As panic grows, New Delhi becomes a ghost town.
People were so afraid to come out. The Delhi streets were completely empty after 8 o'clock. Totally empty. Not even a car would go out. The whole city was completely afraid of Monkey Man.
Then, just as the terror reaches its peak, the incredible happens.
There was no Monkey Man reported anywhere after 3rd or 4th week of May, and it simply disappeared.
What happened in New Delhi? Something held this giant city in its fearful grip for weeks. Was it a monster? Could the Monkey Man be real? Jay Lakhani is a teacher of the Hindu religion. He believes the Monkey Man can be explained by Indian culture.
There is nothing here that would make me feel that there's anything more than superstition, kind of rolled up with fear and rolled up with this idea of religious iconography. It just kind of produced this story.
Lakhani thinks that powerful religious beliefs could have helped create the Monkey Man.
In the Hindu tradition, the word avatar is very central. Avatar means one who descends. The Hindus say the spirit has a habit of descending to earth in human form.
In the Hindu religion, gods known as avatars are believed to descend to earth in times of need. Many are depicted as part human, part animal. Was the Monkey Man a well-meaning avatar that was mistaken for something evil?
India is a poor country struggling with lots of issues, so it's understandable the public would like to project the idea that an avatar is here to rescue them. Any sober Hindu, when he looks at the story in a very sober manner, will immediately come to the conclusion that this was not an avatar. It's not just my take on it, but every sober Hindu, no sober Hindu would really consider this to be an avatar, because there is nothing that the monkey has done which in a way reflects what an avatar is all about, which is to benefit humanity, not frighten it. You see, a lay person is very, very gullible. I suspect it is quite possible that a few pranksters got together, dressed up a couple of monkeys, and had set them loose on the streets of New Delhi. But for a lay person who's kind of steeped in religious tradition, it is understandable that suddenly when he sees a few pranksters, he somehow projects his own idea that this is an avatar on the streets of New Delhi.
Were thousands of New Delhi residents victims of pranks blown out of proportion by widely held religious beliefs? Did the Monkey Man exist at all?
I don't think the Monkey Man existed at all. I think all these things combined with a few real monkeys kind of jumping about and perhaps some pranksters getting onto the act is the reason why we have got this story developing in India as an avatar coming down to earth.
So is that the end of this mystery? Maybe not. Could Monkey Man be a product of the human imagination in a different way? Not a religiously inspired delusion, but a manifestation of the dark side of science. Recently declassified documents hint at some kind of twisted Soviet genetic experiment. Was the Monkey Man a secret weapon that escaped the evil lab of a mad scientist that spawned him? Is that weird? Or what? In New Delhi, thousands of people claim to have been attacked by a metal-clawed monster known as the Monkey Man. Was it simply mass hysteria? Or religious superstition? Scott Marlowe is a cryptozoologist with a remarkable theory.
I believe monsters exist. They may not necessarily be the Saturday or Friday night movie version of the monsters that terrify us on the silver screen, but there are things out there that go bump in the night that are terrifying, to say the least. When I first heard the story of India's Monkey Man, I was pretty certain I knew exactly what it was.
Marlowe's theory is controversial and alarming. He thinks the Monkey Man is a real-life monster created by us.
Monsters exist, and we certainly have the ability now with genetic engineering to create them. Based on some of the descriptions, there's a distinct possibility that monkey men could be some kind of human-ape hybrid.
Could someone have created a creature half man, half ape? And if so, why? Incredibly, this concept isn't as weird as it sounds. It could even be based in fact. Declassified Russian military files have allegedly revealed that in the 1920s, Joseph Stalin secretly tried to create a super soldier.
The super soldier is a genetically engineered creature that is designed with a military purpose in mind. Stalin commissioned a scientist to attempt a hybridization who went to Africa, collected ape DNA, and then attempted to impregnate human women with the sperm of these chimps that he collected the material from. They were trying to create a soldier that had superhuman strength. They wanted the strength of an ape, which is known to be about 7 times that of a human, with the intelligence of a human.
Incredibly, Marlowe believes Stalin wasn't the only one who was messing with nature.
Not to be outdone by the Russians, we attempted to do the same thing. The attempt was not successful by all accounts, but a lot of that had to do with the lack of knowledge on the genetics. Today, it could probably be done.
Are scientists using modern technology to create super soldiers from humans and apes? Could this explain the monkey man?
Some of the evidence that the monkey man is a human-ape hybrid could be that they are frequently reported wearing some sort of helmet or flashing lights and that kind of thing, which would probably be some sort of communications device. The most alarming feature that's reported are metal claws. That seems more of a military weapon. If such experimentation were going on and these creatures were intelligent enough, as presumably they would be, to escape from the facility that was creating them, they could certainly account for the monkey men.
Was the monkey man an escaped super soldier? And why, in an age of predator drones and nuclear bombs, would India need one?
Creating a super soldier using hybridization genetics would probably be a good solution for a country like India, where, yeah, they belong to the nuclear club, but it's not a very popular solution to solving one's problems as a country. A super soldier might be engineered for stealth purposes. They could pursue this type of a thing, especially since in India, monkeys and apes running around are not at all unusual. They could infiltrate, they could blend in, they could perform a number of different things in terms of intelligence gathering or otherwise performing some sort of military function without going detected. I do know if monkey men had been created with genetic engineering for a military purpose, I would be extremely concerned, if not deathly afraid, of the outcome.
Was a hybrid man-ape let loose on the streets of New Delhi? Are we creating man-made monsters? Weird, or what? So there we have it, monster stories from all over the world. In West Virginia, a winged monster 7 feet tall with red eyes terrorizes the town of Point Pleasant. In Newfoundland, a mysterious giant mass of flesh emerges from the depths of the ocean. And in India, a half-man, half-beast attacks thousands and sends an entire city into panic. Are these bizarre stories evidence that monsters exist? Can we dismiss thousands of eyewitnesses who claim these things are true? You decide. Join me again next time for more stories that will undoubtedly be weird or what? You know, I've been around for a while. Met some interesting people. Done some crazy things. So you just might think that there's not much that can take me by surprise. You'd be wrong. The world is full of stories, science, and things that amaze and confound me. Every single day, incredible mysteries that keep me awake at night. Some I can answer. Others just defy logic. Is there life after death? In Connecticut, a man visits a Civil War battlefield where he is suddenly overcome with emotion.
To this day, I don't understand what exactly happened.
Is he the reincarnation of a dead general? In Haiti, 18 years after his death, a man returns from the grave.
This individual had clearly been pronounced dead by the doctors.
Do zombies really exist? And in a remarkable experiment, scientists in England conduct a series of groundbreaking seances. Is it our first genuine proof of the afterlife?
Yeah. It's a weird world, and I love it.
Death. Not exactly pretty. Especially when you consider that one day all of us could end up looking like this. But should we simply accept this as our fate, or is there something else that awaits us? Since the dawn of time, humans have been obsessed with the idea that there's something more than this. Well, is there? Do our lives go on even if we die? Can we return and communicate with our loved ones here on Earth? Is there life after life? And perhaps the most important question of all, can we prove it? Well, just maybe we can. Jeffrey Keane is a retired firefighter. In 1990, he decided to visit the site of the famous Battle of Antietam, one of the bloodiest encounters of the Civil War, and a place where thousands died in just one day.
I was traveling down through Pennsylvania with my wife, antique hunting, and I asked my wife if it was okay if we took a little side trip over to Antietam to see the battlefield.
But what begins as a fun day out will soon turn into a nightmare.
My wife wasn't very much into history, so she remained in the car, and I walked over to where the battle had taken place at the sunken road. Gone about 50 feet when it became very hard to breathe. I started crying. I was very angry. I was very sad. If you take the saddest you've ever been and magnify that by about 1,000 times, that gets close. I was exhausted. I couldn't tell exactly what was going on. I thought I was maybe having a heart attack, but I didn't have any pain.
Overcome by a wave of violent emotions, Jeffrey then has a powerful urge to visit the gift shop.
I felt compelled to go there. I threw a magazine on the counter. I said, I want this, and it was a Civil War quarterly magazine on Antietam. To this day, I don't understand what exactly happened.
For the next 18 months, Jeffrey's life returns to normal. Until one night, when he attends a Halloween party.
It was a really nice party. They'd spent a lot of money on the decorations. They had hired a palm reader. And I sat down in front of this woman, and she took my hands, and I told her the story of what happened in Antietam.
As Jeff tells his story, the palm reader suddenly becomes uneasy.
She's sitting there shaking her head, and she dropped my hands a few times.
And then she drops a bombshell. She believes Jeffrey was at Antietam in a previous life.
She said, you died there, but you hung around for a long time. I said, just let me ask you one question. Are you sure he was dead? She said he was full of holes. That's one thing I'll never forget.
The bizarre encounter will lead Jeffrey on a journey in search of the truth.
The next day, I took my wife to work, and I remembered the magazine that I had to have. I had it for a year and a half and hadn't read it. I opened it up to the section on Antietam where I had had the experience, and my eyes skimmed down the page, and I see a photograph of a general.
As Jeffrey stares at the photo, he is stunned by what he sees.
I look over, and this picture says General John B. Gordon, and when I see the face, I tell people I know the face very well. I shave it every morning. Unless you're unfeeling, unthinking, completely drained of any type of emotion, it's going to have a bit of an effect on you, even if it's just awe and wonder.
Remarkably, Jeffrey is a double for General John B. Gordon. But as he reads on, things get even weirder.
I read in the story he had been wounded 5 times that day. He was shot through the face, and I figured he had probably been killed there.
John B. Gordon was a general of the 6th Alabama Regiment, a hero who was shot in the bloody Battle of Antietam. Could there be a link between Jeffrey and a general who had died nearly 200 years before him? Suddenly, Jeffrey makes another startling connection.
It was on my 30th birthday. At 12 midnight, I got such an horrendous pain in my jaw. It radiated down into my neck. I know what it feels like to be shot through the face. That's how bad it hurt.
Was Jeffrey's mysterious pain somehow related to General Gordon's injuries?
Gordon was 30 years old when he was shot through the face. Same age. That was 10, 15 years before I ever heard Gordon's name. It wasn't like this was worked backwards. I heard about Gordon's wounding. I went over to the hospital, made him fudge up some documents that mimicked the wound that Gordon had 100 or more than 100 years before. Kind of hard to do. And I have the documents to prove the hospital visit.
Could all these remarkable similarities be explained by coincidence? Jeffrey believes there's only one answer.
I don't need any more proof that there's reincarnation because of all the things that happen to me. We never die. We're continuous. We always have been, we always will be. That's how Gordon found me at Antietam. I always say it's the other way around from what people think. I say Gordon found me where our hearts touched at Antietam.
What an extraordinary story. Did a Civil War general who died over a century ago reincarnate, jump into Jeffrey Keene's body, and continue his life through Jeffrey's eyes? Are we all in a continual cycle of birth and rebirth, simply interchanging bodies as we go? And if so, This raises yet another question. Do we get to choose? I mean, who was I before I was who I am now, and who will I be next? Could I be you? Now that is definitely weird. What? Dr. Cynthia Myersberg is a Harvard psychologist. She believes reincarnation is simply a function of how we deal with memories.
Something odd happens, and people go looking, as we all do, to make sense of their lives. If you have a rich imaginative ability, it becomes very difficult to distinguish between something that's a record of perception and a record of imagination. Did I dream that, or did it happen? Did I hear about that, or did I actually experience that? It can be very difficult.
Cynthia believes that one way we do this is by creating false memories.
False memories are what they sound like. The recollections for either events that didn't take place or didn't take place in the way in which they're remembered.
Are people like Jeffrey just making their stories up? If so, why?
Memory, although it feels a lot of times like we're watching a film in our mind's eye, that's not what's really happening. We're always reconstructing it from little pieces that we have saved, in a sense, and we put it back together. And our brain fills in for us the missing parts.
Researchers have been able to study this phenomenon.
It's possible to induce false memories in a matter of moments. For instance, if someone sees a doctored photograph showing him or her as a child in a hot air balloon, people can very quickly form memories for it. The way we measure false memory propensity in the lab is we use something called the DRM, or Dease-Roediger-McDermott paradigm. What the paradigm consists of is we present people with lists of words. In our lab, they listen to them. Then they're asked to write down, without guessing, only those words they're certain they've heard. What makes the task tricky is that each list of words, there's a word that isn't on the list but is related to all the words on the list. So the words might be sour, bitter, sugar, honey, and so forth. But the word sweet is never said. In the lab, past life memory participants were much more likely to endorse having heard words that they didn't actually hear. However, they were no different in terms of being able to correctly identify words that they did hear. So they were more likely to have false memories of words they didn't hear, but their true memory looked just like the control participants. I interpret it to mean that although there's no difference in ability to form true recollections and true memories, there's an increased vulnerability to form memories for events that perhaps did not occur.
Can Jeffrey Keen's claim of reincarnation be dismissed as a series of false memories? Does it explain what struck him down?
People come to believe they have past lives because something weird happens, something that's outside of the norm in some way for them that they need an explanation for.
Is reincarnation real, or simply a product of our minds? Do we all have past, present, and future lives?
We know so little about the nature of reality that I think it'd be very, very foolish to say that this cannot happen.
An emotional collapse at a Civil War battleground leads a man to believe he is the reincarnation of a dead general. Is it possible we all have past lives? Tariq Sator is the facilitator at the Ontario Hypnosis Center. He not only believes reincarnation is real, he can demonstrate it using a process called past life regression.
Past life regression is a series of steps that you go through in order to access memories from previous lifetimes. It is allowing the conscious mind to be put aside for a while as you access the subconscious mind. Begin by just lightly closing your eyes now.
Tariq is preparing a patient, Karen, to travel back not only deep into her own past, but to lives she may have lived before, and from where he can access her memories.
Imagine, if you will, above your head is a point of absolutely pure white light. It starts by first taking the client back through age regression, and typically it's about 14 or 15 years old, and then to 3 or 4 years old.
I'm on my mom's lap and I'm getting all of her attention.
Karen has now gone back over 30 years. The next step will take her into what is known as blue mist, a space in between her current life and the one she lived before.
Take a deep breath now and go beyond the blue mist, finding yourself at a still earlier time.
Incredibly, it appears Karen has now entered a former life.
I am climbing rocks, and there's a forest nearby.
Are you male or female?
I'm male. I think I'm hunting.
Okay.
Tariq believes what Karen is seeing is real.
They're interacting, they're in the body of that past life. They can see out of that person's eyes. It's very, very personal.
To complete the session, Tariq must reverse the process and bring Karen back into her current life and present age.
And one, eyes open, back.
Did Karen actually visit her former life? Is past life regression evidence that reincarnation is real? Dr. Stuart Hameroff is a scientist. He believes the only way to find real proof of reincarnation is by using science.
There's a lot of anecdotal evidence for apparent reincarnation, but it's been dismissed because it seems irrational. Now we have a theory, a possible explanation, so I think all this evidence needs to be reevaluated and considered seriously.
Hameroff's theory concerns one of the greatest mysteries of both religion and science: the soul.
I think the soul is our consciousness, the sum total of our memories and conscious awareness, and I think it can exist outside the body after life and possibly in reincarnation.
But even more remarkable is that Hameroff thinks the soul exists as a series of information, quantifiable by physics.
I think a quantum version of consciousness can give rise to something like a quantum soul that can account for a lot of these anecdotal stories that we've been hearing for eons.
Many scientists believe consciousness exists with cells in the brain, but Hameroff thinks it exists on a subatomic level in quantum particles that can stay connected and survive death.
When a patient has a cardiac arrest and is resuscitated, they often tell a story of a white light, a tunnel, and in many cases floating above their body looking down on what's going on. This could be consciousness as quantum information dissipating. When the patient's resuscitated, the quantum information goes back and the patient wakes up and reports having had a near-death experience or perhaps even an out-of-body experience.
It's an incredible theory. But if our souls do exist in quantum form, how are they reincarnated?
It's conceivable that this quantum information, the quantum soul, if you will, could re-enter an embryo, which would be reincarnation.
Do our souls consist of information that can travel even into an embryo? Have we solved one of the greatest mysteries in the universe?
We know so little about the nature of reality that I think it'd be very, very foolish to say that this cannot happen. And with the anecdotal evidence from reincarnation and memories and past life and so forth, it seems to me that it may be more logical to assume that it does occur.
Was Jeffrey Keane the reincarnation of a long-dead general? Or did false memories convince him it was true? Does the soul exist independent of our bodies? Can we visit past lives? And if we can, what will we find? Weird? Or what? Scientists in England conduct a series of groundbreaking experiments. Did they find the first genuine proof of the afterlife? Hello? I don't know about you, but I've always been scared of things that go bump in the night. Fred? Most of them we can explain, but what about those we can't? Are we surrounded by spiritual entities, the remains of those that have passed from this life? Are they what we call ghosts? And if they are there, are they friendly? And can we communicate with them? In 1993, a team of researchers in the town of Skull, United Kingdom, set out to find indisputable evidence of life after death. Conducting a series of extraordinary seances, they witnessed paranormal events that would mystify science. They called it the Skull Experiment.
What we didn't know was that it was going to become very, very special and work in a pioneering way to provide proof of life after death.
Robin Foy led the seances. He believes the experiment was unique because of their attempts to make sure it was credible.
It was important for us to show to the outside world that we'd taken every security precaution that we could to ensure that the work was fraud-proof.
To conquer the skeptics, the seances were held in the supposedly impenetrable cellar of a suburban house.
The whole place was brick. There were no trapdoors. The only door into the cellar was locked internally. Each one of us would wear luminous armbands so that everybody who was present could see that no one moved. We were using a table which was actually fraud-proof so that nobody could get under it and do anything at all. We were seeking to actually get viable proof that we live on after we die.
The Skull Experiment began in November 1993. As Robin Foy and his team assembled in their cellar, they had no idea what might happen. But it didn't take long to find out.
After a short while, the spirit lights come, little lights about the size of a pea or slightly larger, very bright, and they would sort of perform aerobatics. Later on, there were spirit voices speaking from mid-air. We were able to hear on a one-to-one basis all of the spirit people. Everybody in that room would be regularly touched by spirit hands.
As the experiment continues, the team is amazed as the paranormal activity becomes more intense.
All sorts of different things would materialize in midair and then fall down onto the table. We would hear the bang as that hit the table. We may actually have solid spirit personalities moving around in the room. We were pushing the bounds of psychic research further forward than anyone been able to produce or witness anywhere in the past.
Encouraged by the success, Foy decided to try something extraordinary. Something that would prove they had made contact with the afterlife.
We were doing an experiment with a film that was still in its plastic container. We would have this locked into a security box to ensure that nothing was ever done by us to that film.
It was a remarkable and ambitious idea. The team hoped a spirit might somehow implant an image on the film inside the box. If so, it could be the proof they were looking for. When they finally checked the film, they couldn't believe their eyes.
That was quite amazing. We had hundreds of photographs that were produced to show us various aspects of the spirit world itself. Some of them were so fantastic they really would knock your socks off.
But there was one photograph that was different from the rest. A haunting image of what seemed to be a woman's face.
You actually see on this one areas of this person's face.
Who is the woman? And how did her image appear on the film? Foy believes this chilling incident makes the Skull Experiment the definitive exploration into the presence of the afterlife.
The Skull Experiment, I think, was very, very important because it went further than anybody had ever been able to go before in proving the real existence of life after death.
Despite his claims, many skeptics doubted the results. Did Robin Foy and his team of researchers make contact with the other side? Is the skull experiment proof that there is life after death? Or could it have been an elaborate fake? One way to find out is to try it for ourselves. A UK research team experiences a remarkable series of paranormal events during a series of seances. Did they find proof of life after death? Brian Dunning is a scientific journalist. He believes the events of Skull were nothing more than an illusion.
Here's the problem with seances, is that seances have existed as a magic trick for 200 years. They are an illusionist giving the impression that spirits are in the room. They are a magic trick. It's almost impossible to envision a seance being done seriously by people. They're always performances. So that's why, yeah, it's hard to take a seance seriously.
What we are trying to recreate are the famous skull experiments.
Was the skull experiment a magic trick? To test Dunning's theory, we've set up a fake seance using a professional illusionist. To create the conditions at Skull, the participants are sitting in pitch darkness. Using night vision cameras, we can see them, but they can see nothing at all. The session begins with everyone holding hands.
Give me your hand here and your hand here. Please do not break the psychic circle at any time during the seance. Spirits, are you with us tonight?
The skull experiment claimed that spirit voices seemed to come from midair. The illusionist will attempt to recreate them with an assistant using a cardboard tube as a megaphone.
Speak to us.
She will always love you.
Whoa.
Faking disembodied voices seems simple.
Charles, the name Charles.
But can they convince these participants
that was close.
They are being physically touched by spirits as claimed by the people at Skull?
My spirit guide, I'm going to ask my spirit guide, Francine, will you give us a physical manifestation? I want Francine to come towards the center of the table. What? What happened?
Don't touch me.
Don't bounce yourself! Whoa!
The final trick centers around the claim that objects materialized out of thin air. Is this so easy to disprove?
Leave us now! Leave us!
The experiment is over. Even though his seance was badly faked, the participants are left visibly shaken.
Nobody's laughing. Everybody took that completely seriously. It was a very powerful experience for these people.
Although the participants were fooled, Brian believes this proves the skull experiment was a hoax.
We saw a few of the things today that were reported from the skull experiments. We've seen that those can be easily faked. Do we know that they faked them at Skull? No, of course not, because no controls were applied. We don't know what actually happened. But when we see how easy it is to fake it, how can we know that these could have been real?
Could the greatest experiment into the existence of the afterlife be just an illusionist's game? No doubt. Magic tricks are easy to perform, and many of the claims made at Skull have been dismissed out of hand. But the biggest mystery of all still remains unanswered. Who is this woman? And how did her image appear on a roll of film that was locked inside a box? Even Houdini would have trouble with that one. Peter Schramek is a photography expert. We asked him to examine images from the skull experiment and try to unlock one of its biggest mysteries.
As I understand it, the film was put into this box and locked away, and the exposure, the effect on the film, was supposed to have happened while the film was locked up in this box. My first reaction was, this is an interesting manipulation. I assumed it was something that would have been done in the darkroom. It looks very similar to the kinds of distortions, collages, manipulations that people have done in the darkroom because it's fun to do.
But there was no darkroom at Skull. Was this photograph created by the spirit of a woman? Peter believes the answer to the mystery lies in the type of film they used.
With Polaroid, you have the direct development, so there's no darkroom involved. When you process it, you actually put it into a container that is full of a gelatinous chemical that gets spread onto the film evenly. And that is the chemical that develops the film, contains the dyes that causes the color, and so on. And so you have this jelly-like substance that's being spread over the film to develop it. You're cranking that through by hand or sometimes by motor. And depending on how you crank it, you can get different kinds of distortions and effects simply because for chemical reasons. And that, in my mind, is what's happened in these photographs. All you're seeing are the chemicals that are the way that they've affected the film as it's gone through. What is harder to explain are the actual faces in the images. They're not light effects, they're not chemical effects, they actually are, images of faces.
So how was this haunting image created?
My explanation for that would be that the film has been tampered with, and the film has been put through the camera, and these faces have been exposed into it prior to the supposed experiment. And then when it's processed, these show up, but they show up in this distorted fashion because of the chemical processing distortion. And that actually is quite easy. You can take a roll of film. I can take this sort of brand new roll of film. No one's ever done anything with it. I can take it. I can put this film in the camera. I can shoot the roll of film. I can wind it back. And as I wind it back, I can leave the leader sticking out like this. And no one knows whether this film is exposed or not.
Peter believes he has solved the mystery. But what if the Skull researchers were telling the truth?
I don't think while the film was in the box that any of the effects that we're seeing could have been created unless one believes in some sort of supernatural explanation.
Is this a woman from the spirit world? Did Robin Foy and his research team find proof of life after death at Skull? Or was it an ingenious hoax? Whatever the truth is, this is weird, or what? In Haiti, a man dies after a sudden and mysterious illness. 18 years later, he returns from the grave. Could this prove that zombies exist? When it comes to the mysteries of the afterlife, perhaps there's nothing weirder than zombies. The dictionary describes a zombie like this: the body of a dead person given the semblance of life, but made mute and willless by a supernatural force, usually for some evil purpose. Sounds like my bank manager. But could it be true? Could mindless, shuffling cannibals actually exist outside of Hollywood? The tiny nation of Haiti is home to many mysteries, but none weirder than the tale of a man named Clairvius Narcisse. Wade Davis is an explorer and author. He investigated the case, which began in 1962 when Narcisse suddenly became violently ill.
I mean, the constellation of symptoms that he reported were so strange that you initially thought this had to be coming from the realm of science fiction.
Although doctors work feverishly, it's too late to save the stricken Narcisse.
The death was witnessed by both the physicians and nurses and his own family members, and his sister had actually affixed her thumbprint to the death certificate, verifying that this was her brother had died.
Devastated, family members say their final goodbyes, and Clairvius is finally laid to rest.
You could go to his gravesite, where the slab of cement had been placed upon his grave shortly after his demise.
It should have been the last anyone heard of Clarius narcisse. But 18 years later, something incredible will happen that ensures no one forgets his name. In 1980, Clarius' sister is going about daily chores in her family village. Suddenly, she sees something beyond comprehension. Standing before her is her deceased brother. Clarius narcisse has risen from the dead.
He claimed that he was buried. He claimed that he was magically resuscitated by a sorcerer, and that led off to the north of the country where he had been working as a sort of a zombie slave for 18 years. Now, clearly there's no incentive, economic incentive, to create an indentured force of labor in a country where costs of labor are trivial. I think the idea of slavery ties into a deeper concept, which is that the essence of a zombie is someone who has lost their soul. But in addition to being cast in perpetuity into this state of kind of limbo, you're also said to be made a slave. And of course, given the colonial history, that combines to create a kind of a phenomena that's almost worse than death, because you lose your personal willpower and your physical freedom. And together that combines to make the plight of a zombie the worst possible fate of the individual, which is precisely why in Haiti, the fear is not of zombies, as the movies imply, the bad movies, but of becoming a zombie.
Did Clarius narcisse return from the dead a zombie?
There was no question that this individual had clearly been pronounced dead by the doctors. And then the question became, why? How? What happened to him?
This incredible story attracts the attention of a team of scientists who are keen to examine the case and uncover the truth.
They investigated all these lines of evidence, analysis of the fingerprints by forensic experts, the testimony of the family members and the doctors.
After months of searching, the investigators come to a remarkable conclusion.
Really led two very reputable scientists to go public saying they had found the first provable instance of a zombie.
What did the scientists find? Did Clarius narcisse rise from the dead? Do zombies exist? Stephen Schlossman is a Harvard psychiatrist. Incredibly, he believes the answer could be yes.
When I started thinking about how I would explain zombies medically, it was kind of a lark, and then it ended up getting a little creepy. The typical zombie, in my view, is slow, shambling, can't figure even the simplest of dilemmas out, wants to eat human flesh. There is ways you can medically explain the behavior.
Remarkably, Schlossman believes just a few changes in the human brain could turn one of us into one of them. It starts with the cerebellum.
This is a sheep brain, but imagine this is a human brain, which looks an awful lot like this, just bigger. The function of the cerebellum is to help us maintain balance. In zombies, we've got to think that there's something not right with their cerebellum, because zombies are really not balanced well. They hold their hands out so they can maintain balance. They've got that wide-based gait. They've got truncal ataxia, which is when the trunk of the body moves back and forth and up and down. That's all cerebellar disease. And it's easy to sort of think that whatever causes the zombie plague must take a whack at the cerebellum. There's a number of diseases that can affect the cerebellum. In those cases, you have exactly the shambling gait that you see in the zombie movies.
The shuffling is one thing, but what explains a zombie's mindless violence?
The amygdala is the most primitive part of the brain. It's the region of the brain that has very base emotions.
Our amygdala is the source of all anger and rage. But it's kept in check by our frontal lobes, the most advanced part of our brain.
So we might have an impulse when somebody cuts us off on the road to yell at them, to tailgate them, to do something not nice. The frontal lobe jumps in and stops you from doing that. When we watch zombie movies, we can guess that zombie frontal lobes are pretty much gone. They can't hold back their impulses.
Could a unique combination of brain injuries somehow create a zombie? There's just one problem.
The zombie, by definition, has to die and be reanimated. There is no medical basis for something coming back from the dead so far.
But how does Schlossman explain that Clairvius Narcisse was certified dead, buried, then returned from the grave?
Maybe he's not telling the truth. Maybe he's undergone some kind of neurologic insult that prevents him from remembering what's just happened. But if we're talking about really rising from the dead, that doesn't happen.
A Haitian man dies from a mysterious illness, then returns from the grave 18 years later. Is he proof that zombies exist? Wade Davis has investigated the case and has an incredible theory. He thinks Clairvius Narcisse didn't die at all, that something made him just seem to be dead. But who or what could have fooled the doctors?
There are lots of drugs that can kill, but to find a drug that brings you to the doorway of death and then brings you back into the realm of the living would be remarkable indeed.
In 1982, Davis made a breakthrough. He discovered that Haitian voodoo priests were rumored to be using a special poison to turn people into zombies. Was this the drug he was looking for? He decided to visit Haiti and see for himself.
Through a series of negotiations, I was able to get a local priest to make this poison for me. I collected all the raw ingredients, which ranged from, dried toads to dried fish, dried snakes, plants, human remains. I collected all the raw ingredients so I could identify them taxonomically. All the different stages of the elaboration, because fundamentally the ingredients are roasted on a grill, pounded in a mortar and pestle, sifted to create this sort of powder. And I brought them all back through U.S. Customs, and it was kind of amusing because I came through for the first day on Easter Sunday, 1982, Kennedy Airport, and I had no permits whatsoever, and I had this suitcase made of surplus 7-Up cans that had been printed in Saudi Arabia because you could see the Arabic script, and it was filled to the gunnels with all these ingredients, including human remains, a human skull. I had a live Bufo marinus toad, the biggest toad, this big, in my backpack, and no permits whatsoever. And I opened this up, and the customs guy in New York just slammed it shut, and he said, and I quote, "Look, it's Easter Sunday. I don't know who the you are. I didn't even want to have to work today. Just get the out of here."
Back in the U.S., Davis takes the poison to be tested in a lab. He finds something extraordinary. It contains a chemical more deadly than cyanide.
Tetrodotoxin acts by physically blocking nerves, but it brings on a state of apparent death so profound that it has many times fooled physicians.
Had the Haitian priests discovered a drug that could replicate death? If so, where did they get it?
In Haiti, there's this sort of famous pufferfish, which inflates like a big porcupine. Without doubt, the Haitian sorcerers had identified a natural product that contained a toxin that could make someone appear to be dead.
Could this powerful drug produce the symptoms Narcisse experienced?
He said he was paralyzed. He could hear himself pronounced dead. He could sense the sheet pulled over his eyes. He heard his sister begin to wail, but he could not respond.
Was an innocent man turned into a zombie? The evidence seems undeniable, except for one thing.
No one knows if Narcisse was administered the poison. What we do know is that he was pronounced dead when he turned back into the realm of the living. So presumably, if any of this is accurate, somehow he received the poison. According to what he said, the poison was rubbed into the skin. And this is important because the folkloric idea that you read in the literature is that the poison is placed into a cross on the ground, the victim walks over, and suddenly all things unravel. Well, that's a magical idea, no doubt, because obviously physiologically, no poison is going to go through the callous feet of a peasant. But again, this is where you have to separate out what might be called the view from within from the view from without. According to Narcisse, he had the poison rubbed into his skin. And this would be important because the effective way for this powder to be administered would be through the blood.
All right, let's think about this for a second. We know that a certain set of brain alterations, diseases, or injuries could cause the zombie-like symptoms you see in the movies. That a mysterious poison has the power to mimic death, but is there any real proof that we can return from the dead? Well, let me tell you something. The living dead are living among us. And they're in Detroit. At a warehouse in Detroit, something remarkable is happening. Inside these containers, 103 people are waiting to return from the dead. This is a Cryonics center. The people entombed here have made an incredible choice: to have their bodies frozen after death, with the hope that science will one day bring them back to life. Ben Best is the president of the Cryonics Institute. He believes not only can we survive death, but that the people here haven't actually died.
We do call them patients because we don't regard them as being dead in an ultimate sense. I think in practice, be regarded as a hospital, because I think that's what we're doing. We're holding these metabolically challenged patients.
But can cryogenics work? It's a remarkable and controversial process.
Behind me are our cryostats. They hold liquid nitrogen, which is at minus 196 degrees Celsius. Each of these cylindrical units holds 6 patients.
Best believes cryogenics has changed our definition of death. Only a few decades ago, if your heart stopped, that was it.
But it's just not the way we see things anymore.
How do you keep someone who is dead alive? It begins by pumping oxygen-rich blood throughout the body. This keeps cells alive and avoids damage caused by rigor mortis. Then, the body must be cooled.
We don't just drop the patient in a liquid nitrogen. That kind of rapid cooling would be very damaging. So we try to cool in a controlled manner. If you cool too quickly, then you get too much cracking. We can't prevent cracking entirely, but certainly if you just drop the patient directly into liquid nitrogen, there'd be a lot of cracking and shattering. What we want to do is we want to cool as quickly as possible while the cryoprotectant, the medical grade antifreeze, is still in a liquid state. And then when it solidifies, we want to cool very slowly, because while it's in a liquid state, the idea, you want the colder the better. But when it becomes a solid, if you cool too quickly, you create thermal stress.
The body temperature is slowly lowered, first by an ice bath, and then in a cooling chamber where it will reach minus 196 degrees. Best believes this will preserve these bodies for hundreds or perhaps thousands of years. But why?
It seems to me as if you're preserving all the material there, that some future technology is going to be able to figure out a way to get that all fixed and going again. It's reasonable to think that nanomachines can restore the person to their original condition.
Nanomachines already exist. Tiny machines smaller than a single cell. Scientists believe they could soon flow through our bloodstream, targeting viruses, repairing organs, and destroying disease. Can cryogenics give us life after death? Could it even conquer death itself? Best believes it is our greatest hope for eternal living.
It doesn't seem so much more unreasonable than to speculate that people will someday live on Mars.
Can we die and wake up 1,000 years later and resume our lives? And even if we can, would we really want to? Or do we return as zombies, doomed to a mindless existence? Is life after death really life at all? Weird. Or what? So there we have it. Stories of life after death from all over the world. In Connecticut, a man is overcome with emotion at a Civil War battlefield. Is he the reincarnation of a dead general? In England, scientists conduct a remarkable paranormal experiment. Did they find the first proof of the afterlife? And in Haiti, a man returns from the grave 18 years after his death. Are the living dead walking amongst us? Do zombies exist? Are these stories evidence of life after death? Can we dismiss those who claim they are true? You decide. Join me again next time for more stories that will undoubtedly be weird or what? You know, I've been around for a while. Met some interesting people. Done some crazy things. So you just might think that there's not much that can take me by surprise. You'd be wrong. The world is full of stories, science and things that amaze and confound me. Every single day, incredible mysteries that keep me awake at night. Some I can answer. Others just defy logic. Is the end of the world upon us? In Wyoming, a deadly force is sleeping underneath Yellowstone National Park. Could it awake and destroy the planet?
It could happen today. It could happen tomorrow. It's a race against time.
In Alabama, a NASA scientist makes a remarkable discovery. Is a killer solar storm coming our way?
If it were hit today, would knock us out, would knock civilization to its knees.
And across the world comes the threat of an invasion by robots. Could the Terminator be real?
Yeah. It's a weird world, and I love it.
You believe in prophecies? Some of the biggest events in history have been foreseen by some of the greatest minds. Nostradamus predicted World War I, Hitler, Napoleon, the election of U.S. President Barack Obama, and the atomic destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. How did he do that? And why can't I do that? Were they simply lucky guesses? Can we somehow see with incredible accuracy what will happen hundreds or perhaps thousands of years into the future? And if we can, do we really want to know what's coming? Patrick Jarrell is an astronomer. In 1996, he did something extraordinary. He devoted his life to studying the complex and mysterious texts of the ancient Mayans. What he found is now the stuff of Hollywood. The world is coming to an end, and soon.
What captivated me the most after reading the Mayan prophecies was that they calculated this huge cataclysm at the end of 2012. And this was very disturbing information for me. I said, wow, gee, my whole future and the whole future of everybody will be destroyed in a few years. What am I going to do? And that changed my whole life. Before 1996, I planned to become the oldest person in the world by following a long living diet. In the morning, 1.5 liter orange juice, in the midday, 7 steamed bananas, and in the evening, rice with 1 kilo vegetables and 2 egg yolks.
But knowing when the world would end wasn't enough. Patrick had to know how it would happen. For the next 2 years, using complex mathematical formulas, he set out to decode the Mayans' hidden messages.
I was immediately grasped by the fact that they had very high accuracy and that they were able to calculate something very spectacular into the future. And it took me several years to decode it, but I found what will happen in 2012.
What did Patrick find? Is it an asteroid? Nuclear war? How will the world end? Jarrell believes on December 12th, 2012, a sleeping giant will awake.
The supervolcano will erupt, and that will destroy completely our civilization.
There are at least 7 known supervolcanoes on Earth. They contain massive amounts of molten rock, which is trapped inside them below the Earth's crust. The pressure builds until finally it bursts, exploding in a catastrophic eruption thousands of times more powerful than a regular volcano. The last eruption occurred over 70,000 years ago. Could one of these giants be a threat to us now? Remarkably, the answer could be yes. And it's underneath Yellowstone National Park. Over 2 million tourists visit Yellowstone every year. Little do they know that under the surface lies one of the deadliest forces on the planet. Incredibly, this sleeping supervolcano may be coming to life. In 2004, scientists detected the ground starting to bulge around Yellowstone. Soon after, over 1,000 mini-earthquakes occurred there in just a few months. Some dismiss it, but others say it can only mean one thing.
The scientists that are saying that, well, the rumbling at Yellowstone Park, that is normal, well, they don't know what the Maya knew. The rotation from the Earth will change. Once the inner core of the Earth starts moving on its head, then the lava that is around the inner core will be pushed also very sharply to the crust. And we will have an eruption of the Yellowstone at the end of 2012.
Did Patrick Jarrell unlock the Mayan secret? Is the Yellowstone supervolcano about to erupt? And could it mean the end of the world? Robert Vicino is an entrepreneur and survivalist. He's not waiting to find out.
If you thought Mount St. Helens was something to see, wait till you see Yellowstone go.
In 2003, Robert decided that there was only one way to survive the blast of a supervolcano: by building volcano-proof bunkers all over America.
It's a race against time to get our shelters built. You could say it isn't so and ignore the possibilities, but it's not going to make it go away.
Made of concrete and steel, These self-contained bunkers are buried underground. They can house up to 1,000 people and store enough food for a year. But who is going to use them?
We have about 10,000 members currently signed up from all over the world. After the Japan quake, we had a spike. I think we received 600-700 people in one day. So the awareness is going up. You know, as my prediction is, if we're still here a year from now, in early 2012, we're going to have a line. People are going to be waiting in line, begging to get in, and it'll be too late. When I first mentioned it to people, they thought it was crazy. I found that the reactions have changed in the last year, and even more specifically, this year, 2011. Now they're really wanting to know, where is it, and how big are they, and how do we get in, and how much does it cost? Because I think people are starting to realize it's coming. And it may be coming sooner than we think. You know, something interesting, and I just heard this today. Somebody advised me that, you know, the Mayan calendar talks about or we believe it ends on December 21st, 2012. And a lot of people say, well, so what, it ends, it's going to restart. And there's no proof of anything, and that's not what they meant, that the world was going to end. What I heard this morning was, 15 years ago, the common interpretation of the calendar was that it would end on December 24th, 2011. So it's closer than we think.
Could Vicino and his friends someday be the only surviving members of the human race?
If Yellowstone blows, you're looking at a life extinction event. The only parties that are going to survive are those that are underground. It could happen today. It could happen tomorrow. I think the Mayans knew something. How they knew, I don't know. Were they informed by some other culture? Did they know? Were they able to see into the future? Were they able to calculate the patterns of the solar system in the heavens to know when the alignments are going to happen, and when this happens, that'll happen? Did they exist in the last go-around 3,600 years ago? Or did somebody tell them?
Does this survivalist know something we don't? Whatever the truth is, he's taking no chances.
I don't know what inspired Noah, but I would imagine he was as passionate about what he was doing as I am.
Are Robert Vicino and Patrick Gerald simply prophets of doom? Or could they be right? Will a supervolcano cause the end of the world?
Crazy, isn't it? I mean, if you listen to every doomsday prediction, prophecy, or conspiracy theory, you'd never leave the house, right? I mean, what is it with these people? Do they think that just because they say a giant volcano is going to rip through this planet and wipe us out, that we're going to believe them? I don't believe a word they say. I'm just being careful.
A man decoding the texts of the ancient Mayans uncovers an astonishing prophecy. Will a supervolcano at Yellowstone destroy our planet? Stanley Ambrose is an anthropologist. He thinks we have reason to believe it might.
I suppose if you really wanted to stay around in a place that was struck by an apocalypse, that would be a good idea. I'd rather move.
A lifetime spent studying supervolcanoes has convinced Ambrose they are a force to be feared.
If Yellowstone blows, it would eject a huge amount of dust and gases up to 50 kilometers into the stratosphere. We have to fear global famine. We can imagine complete loss of crop production for decades to centuries.
In 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted in Washington state, sending volcanic ash over 10 kilometers into the air. Ambrose thinks this massive eruption would be dwarfed by Yellowstone. Could humans survive this kind of catastrophic explosion? We may know the answer because it's already happened.
The volcanic eruption of Toba stands among the most explosive and largest in Earth history.
Around 70,000 years ago, a supervolcano exploded at Toba in Indonesia. It was so powerful, it left a crater 100 kilometers long, still visible today.
Volcanic ash rained down over an area larger than the size of the United States. That's big. The Earth was surrounded by this thick blanket of sulfuric acid haze. The sun weakened. Much solar energy was reflected back into outer space. The landscape around the world was basically devegetated. If you lived anywhere from Southeast Asia across to India and Pakistan, the land would have been covered with a very, very fine white dust. That's the volcanic ash. And it is really fine and it is really white. And like snow, it reflects sunlight off of the land surface. Unlike snow, it didn't melt. It had to be washed away by the rains whenever the rains occurred, and that doesn't seem to have been very often. It's a global shock to the world system, what I call an instant ice age.
Before the eruption at Toba, the Earth was home to a healthy population of humans. Ambrose believes we can judge our fate by looking at what happened to them.
The volcanic eruption caused a population crash unlike any that had been seen previously in human history. And during the next 10,000 years, there were very few archaeological traces of humans.
Did a supervolcano take us to the brink of extinction? Could Yellowstone do the same now?
Everything within the blast zone would be buried. There would probably be general infrastructure failure. Agricultural production would, of course, be hammered. The United States would lose its entire grain belt. And if the whole world got cold the way it did with Toba, then there would be few choices of where to go to get food.
It's an alarming scenario. Should we heed the warning? Is the Yellowstone supervolcano ready to blow?
Sometimes it's bulging up like it's going to explode. Then these bulges go back down. One of these bulges coming up is not going to go back down. The pressure just might continue increasing. And that's when it's time to head for the hills.
Could Stanley Ambrose be right? Are billions of people in imminent danger of death by supervolcano? Jake Lowenster is the chief scientist at the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory.
It's my job to worry about whether Yellowstone's going to erupt.
Jake studied the supervolcano's behavior. He believes it's not a monster, but a pussycat.
People talk about impending doom because they know there have been eruptions in Yellowstone's past. There have been very, very large eruptions at Yellowstone, the size of eruptions that people will call super eruptions. One of the things that you'll hear about when people talk about Yellowstone is somehow that it's overdue. And they throw out this number of 600,000 years for an interval between these large eruptions. Well, that number is pretty much taken out of nowhere. If you did the math on those three big eruptions at Yellowstone, the number for the interval would be about 730,000 years. Of course, the last eruption was 640,000 years. So the number 600,000 is more appealing if you're trying to build the case that somehow it's overdue. But second of all, here you're doing statistics based on a sample population of 2, the interval between the first and second, and the second and third large eruption at Yellowstone. Sample population of 2, not very big, not really statistically meaningful to talk about how often big eruptions occur at Yellowstone. And finally, in terms of this, there's no guarantee that Yellowstone will have another one of these super eruptions. Volcanoes have life cycles. They are born, they live their lives, they die. There are very few places that we can point to around the world that have had more than 3 very large eruptions. There is a remote possibility of those eruptions in the future. It's just a question of whether the kind of activity we're seeing now actually forecasts that anything is in the offing. But there's no reason to expect a big eruption at Yellowstone within our lifetime, which doesn't seem very worrying to me.
Why is Jake so sure? He thinks there is something the prophets of doom have overlooked.
Well, the way that Yellowstone has erupted most of the time is through these smaller lava flows, which are similar to those that happen in Hawaii, which, as you can imagine, would be locally very interesting, but not an international problem.
In the last 2 million years, the Yellowstone supervolcano has had 3 giant eruptions. Jake believes a crucial fact is preventing another one. Yellowstone erupts all the time, but on such a tiny scale, it produces nothing but harmless flows of lava.
Lava flows can block roads, forest fires might start, but they sort of roll very slowly across the ground. You could generally outrun them very easily, so they're not very damaging events.
Far from causing a disaster, Jake thinks these lava flows are keeping a lid on the sleeping giant.
Anytime that you're having a volcanic eruption, you're removing pressure on the magma chamber. It seems to be relatively commonplace for Yellowstone to have this kind of activity.
Are many eruptions at Yellowstone keeping us safe from the supervolcano? Do they explain its recent rumblings?
Around 2009, 2010, we had a couple earthquake swarms. In a swarm, you have a number of medium-sized earthquakes, and they happen all in one particular location. They were among the larger ones that we've had.
But what caused the quakes? Scientists believe magma is flowing into the volcanic chamber, pushing up the crust. Is this a sign of an impending giant eruption?
There was about 25 centimeters or 10 inches, something like this, of uplift at Yellowstone. Between 1925 and 1975, it rose about 3 times that amount. So that uplift doesn't, in particular, seem very worrying to me. The kinds of activity we're seeing are the kind of activity that clearly has been going on for hundreds and even thousands of years.
Even if Jake is right, there's another burning question. Why are some people certain the Yellowstone supervolcano will erupt in 2012?
I think there's a subset of the population out there that just likes to be scared in a way. They like to come up with things that kind of stir the pot, but there's no clock beneath volcanoes that tells them when to erupt. Based on the information that we're seeing, there's no guarantee that Yellowstone will ever have another one of these super eruptions.
Were the ancient Mayans right? Will a supervolcano wipe out the human race in the greatest mass extinction since the Big Bang? Or is Yellowstone's sleeping giant nothing more than a harmless firecracker? Weird, or what? Everywhere you look, our planet is teeming with life. Whether a single-celled amoeba, a snail, or incredibly complex organisms and species like us. But all life forms on Earth have one thing in common. Our very existence depends upon, in fact, is at the mercy of just one thing. If it's in trouble, then there's trouble for all of us. They say you shouldn't stare directly into the sun. But for over 3 decades, NASA scientist David Hathaway has done exactly that. In 2005, he noticed something very strange.
It was a little unexpected by many of us, myself included.
Hathaway was tracking sunspots in giant regions of intense magnetic activity that occur on the surface of the sun. But the greatest danger to our planet is what explodes out of them. Solar flares.
Solar flares can blast material off of the sun, a million miles an hour.
With a force of 10 billion atomic bombs, solar flares catapult billions of tons of red-hot plasma into space and sometimes directly at Earth.
When it strikes the Earth, can shape the Earth's magnetic field, does some spectacular things like produce aurora borealis, can also do things to our technology in particular. Solar flares can cause satellites to deorbit and ultimately re-enter the Earth's atmosphere and burn up, so you literally lose the satellite.
Solar flares and sunspots occur in regular cycles, but in 2008, Hathaway discovered something remarkable. Suddenly, they appeared to mysteriously stop.
We're seeing a sunspot cycle, the smallest we've seen in at least 100 years or perhaps 200 years. We didn't see sunspots for literally months at a time. That had us a little surprised.
Some scientists believe the change in the sunspot cycles is the calm before an unprecedented solar storm. A wave of solar flares so destructive, scientists call it Space Katrina. But now, other ominous signs suggest the sun could be waking from its deep slumber.
We've gone from no sunspots to 20 or 30 sunspots on the sun on a given day now. We've also seen the number of flares increase.
Is there something wrong with the star that gives life to all things on Earth?
We've had some fairly wild predictions. We've got to go way back. You've got to go back to the 1600s to find the sun misbehaving or acting as weirdly as it is now.
Is our sun preparing to launch the biggest solar storm in history? A NASA scientist discovers strange activity in solar flares on the surface of the sun. Could a giant solar storm be coming our way? Or is there another explanation for the sun's weird behavior? Nassim Haramein is a scientist. He believes he has the answer. In 2009, he made a remarkable discovery when viewing images taken by a NASA satellite.
What I noticed is when I was looking at this, first of all, we see two objects appear. Those two objects seem to have moved together and have moved across the frame. What's strange about this particular sequence is that when you follow this object, they make almost a 90-degree angle turn and then entering the sun.
NASA claimed the objects were simply comets or glitches. But when Nassim studied them more closely, he came to an amazing conclusion.
And when I started to see these objects, I couldn't believe my eyes. They were immense. I mean, they only look like little dots on the data, but a little dot beside the sun means that the object is almost the size of the Earth.
Planet-size objects entering the sun. Had Nassim found something extraordinary that even NASA had missed? He thinks there's only one explanation.
I believe these objects may be intergalactic ships from advanced civilization. They appear to be under intelligent control. They don't appear to act in a natural way that you would expect from, you know, cosmological objects like comets and meteorites and so on. It may sound completely outrageous, but imagine a civilization that's like thousands, if not millions of years ahead of us. Look at what we did in 150 years of advanced technology. We went from like literally horse and buggy to having rockets that are going to the moon and space shuttle and space stations and all this in 150 years. Imagine if we had 1,000 years of advancements in technology or 1,000,000 years in advancement. What would our ships look like? Well, they might be the size of planets.
Could this explain the sun's odd behavior? Are changes in its sunspot and solar flare activity being caused by alien ships?
These solar flares appears to emanate right after the objects impact the sun. To me, clear that the two are absolutely related, and the sun flare is most likely the shock wave resulting from the penetration of the objects through the surface of the sun.
Alien spacecraft deliberately crashing into the sun. It's an incredible theory, but why would they do it? According to NASA, the answer lies in the astronomical records of the ancient Egyptians.
When I looked at all the data around the world from all these civilizations, they all talked about the sun gods. When you looked at these texts and the way they described them, they talked about the sun gods using the sun as a gateway. If you were an advanced civilization, and here I'm talking about a very advanced civilization, you could maybe enter and then come out at any other point in the universe. To me, after all these years, it has really become, a fact of life. And I'm, not surprised anymore when people come up to me and say, when I was 10, I saw this object in the sky, or, a few months ago, I saw this amazing, object that could not be a plane and all this stuff. It's so common. So many people have seen it. And now there is governments that are releasing files that, from the military facilities, from extremely credible, sources. You're talking generals and all sorts of high-level military personnel coming forward, talking about this activity around the world. There is true phenomenon occurring that has to do with UFO activity and extraterrestrial activity, supporting this idea that maybe the sun gods are on their way back.
Is our sun part of an intergalactic highway being used by alien traffic? Are they responsible for disrupting its natural cycles and threatening the Earth? Now, we did some pretty strange things on the Enterprise, but this is weird or what? Let me see if I got this straight. NASA scientists say our sun's sunspot cycles are behaving weirdly, and this could cause a giant killer solar flare to head towards Earth, right? While another guy, Nassim, thinks that there's something else causing these solar flares. He thinks aliens in spaceships the size of the Earth are crashing in and out of the sun, wreaking havoc. Nassim's theory seems crazy, right? Or is it? Our sun is acting like an oddball. Are its natural cycles being disrupted by giant UFOs? Is a fatal solar storm on its way to Earth? NASA researcher David Hathaway has an explanation that's far more down to earth. He thinks we have nothing to worry about.
This recent sunspot cycle has started later than expected, and I think I understand it. The sunspot cycle is caused by magnetic fields. Those magnetic fields that make the sunspots. And we've known for decades that it's the flows within the sun that take those magnetic fields, amplify them, and produce sunspots every 11 years. But the devil is in the details. Exactly what flows are there inside the sun that do this? What are the structure of those flows? And we're getting a better handle on that, but we're still not quite there yet. That we still really haven't got a model for how the sun does this, where we can take the equations and march them forward in time, the way a meteorologist might do with the equations for flows on in the Earth's atmosphere.
The sun's magnetic fields violently swirl around the surface like powerful ocean currents. They produce sunspots and solar flares until finally something bizarre happens.
The sun's magnetic field flips.
Every 11 years, the sun's magnetic poles do a backflip. Scientists believe this causes a dramatic decrease in sunspot and solar flare activity. But does it threaten us now?
We had weak magnetic fields produced on the surface of the sun during the last sunspot cycle. And because they were weak, we'll survive this without any major inconvenience.
The end of the worlders almost certainly have it wrong. The timing's just way off.
We may be safe for the moment, but could a mega solar storm hit us in the future? And what would happen if it did? Lawrence Joseph is a science journalist.
If a solar storm hit today, would knock us out, would knock civilization to its knees without any exaggeration.
How? An historical event could provide the answer. On September 1st, 1859, British astronomer Richard Carrington was looking through his telescope when a giant solar flare exploded onto the Earth.
It caused the northern lights to dance down to the equator. You could read a book at midnight outside because of the incredible radiation. The Carrington event caused some fires in telegraph offices and caused some disruption. But basically, it didn't inflict great damage.
Why didn't this massive flare destroy us?
There was no power grid holding society together. There was no telecom. There was none of the things that we've come to rely upon existed back then.
Joseph believes that if a similar solar flare hit us today, our massive reliance on electricity would be our downfall.
We're talking a blackout that could last months or years, could cover half to two-thirds of the continent. After a month, I can't really see anything but anarchy or the beginning of it. It's the paradox of progress, I call it. We have become more vulnerable to these storms, and the storms are headed our way. I mean, the shields are down, Scotty.
In 1989, a small solar flare knocked out the Quebec power grid and left 6 million people without power in the dead of winter. Joseph believes a giant flare would destroy every power grid on the planet. No electricity means no food.
I'm damn concerned people would really begin to die off in large numbers. So what are you going to do? We don't know. I mean, people go head for the hills. Well, what are you going to do in the hills? I don't know what to do in the hills. Most people don't.
Have our advances in technology made us vulnerable to a super solar storm? Is the sun's mysterious behavior natural, or are aliens to blame? Weird, or what? A world-renowned inventor makes an astonishing prediction.
20 years from now, computers will be operating fully at human levels.
Are we facing an uprising of killer machines? Could the Terminator be real? It's incredible, isn't it? If we were to believe the ancient prophecies, or our modern-day doomsday theorists, or even some of our best scientists, then not only is the end of the world going to happen, but there's lots of ways that nature could destroy us. And none of them are nice. But what if they're all wrong? What if the thing that will wipe us out has nothing to do with volcanoes or solar storms? Or what if there's something, aside from nuclear weapons, of course, that we've created that's an even bigger threat? Weird. Or what? In 1984, Hollywood gave the world a futuristic science fiction blockbuster. The story of a cyborg assassin sent back in time from 2029. The Terminator posed a remarkable question. Could robots take over and destroy us? Nearly 3 decades later, we may have the answer. Ray Kurzweil is a world-renowned inventor and futurist. He believes science fiction will become reality sooner than we think.
In the last 15 years, we've seen millions-fold improvement in the power of computers. And this is not just an idle speculation about the future, that's what we've seen. 20 years from now, computers will be operating fully at human levels.
It's an extraordinary theory based on an extraordinary fact. Today's computers are 100 billion times more powerful than they were a century ago. And their power is growing. Kurzweil believes they are rapidly catching us.
Computers already exceed humans at logical thinking, like playing games. There are robotic cars with artificial intelligence that are driving without human drivers. A computer today can look at an electrocardiogram and diagnose it with the accuracy of doctors. And that's something that wasn't feasible even a couple of years ago. So things are moving more and more quickly.
Are we experiencing the rise of the machines? Are our PCs more than simply harmless pieces of plastic and metal?
They'll continue to grow exponentially in the basic hardware power, more than doubling in power every year. We'll get to human levels of intelligence in a machine by my estimates around 2029.
Wait a minute, what did you say?
We'll get to human levels of intelligence in a machine by my estimates around 2029.
2029 is the year from which the Terminator made its return. Will machines equal, then surpass our brain power in just 20 years? Incredibly, Kurzweil believes it won't end there.
By my calculations, when we get to around 2045, we will have multiplied the intelligence of our human-machine civilization 1 billion-fold by merging with this intelligent technology we're creating. That will be such a profound, singular transformation when we can actually vastly multiply our own intelligence.
Will man and machine merge before the middle of this century? And if so, what does it mean for us?
It's not an invasion, from another planet. And people say, oh, we'll lose our humanity. In my mind, that is our humanity. That's part of who we are. Our computers, our technology is part of the human civilization. So we will transcend our biology, not our humanity. I believe we will embody our human values in these machines. They're part of human civilization already. I don't like the term transhumanism because it implies that we're going to transcend our humanity. I think the goal, anyway, is to keep our humanity and transcend the limitations of our biology. And that's not a new story. If we hadn't done that, human life expectancy would still be 23, which is what it was 1,000 years ago.
Could our world end not by natural disaster, but with humankind simply becoming obsolete? John Leslie is a professor of philosophy at the University of Guelph in Canada.
It could be in the next 20, 30 years, we have computers which are more intelligent than humans and which take over control of our lives. And there's an obvious possibility there that things could go badly wrong.
John believes that far from advancing humanity, creating uber-intelligent robots and computers could backfire on all of us.
If robots became super intelligent, they could well have very little interest in the human race. They could think of themselves as superior humans and look on us in the same way as we look on ants. And the machine could come to the answer, let's get rid of biological humans and put machines in place of them.
Are the machines we've created going to turn on us and take over our planet? Is Hollywood right?
You have to remember that the science fiction of today quite often turns out to be the science fact of tomorrow.
According to John, it's not only Terminators that pose a very real threat to our survival.
In fact, one of the dangers here is that it may be that computers are in charge of the system which controls nuclear bombs. We simply don't know to what extent they are in charge of the destructive forces.
Could a machine deliberately trigger a nuclear holocaust? It's a terrifying scenario. But Leslie has an even more frightening theory. The ultimate threat to the human race is already in our homes.
You could argue that the internet is, at present, a gigantic computer, and that its intelligence far exceeds the intelligence of any individual human. Certainly the amount of knowledge you can get very, very rapidly on the internet is much bigger than you could get by consulting the greatest memory experts. I believe that the future of the internet is pretty certainly going to push it in the direction of more and more intelligence.
Every day, over 2 billion people log on to the internet. It connects most of the world's computers and databases, moving information around the planet. John believes the internet could evolve into a central brain that leads a cybernetic revolt against mankind.
It could become immensely intelligent and become, therefore, what takes over world government, and possibly then decides that humans are irrelevant and gets rid of them. That's just one way in which we could be annihilated almost immediately.
Will robots blow us up with our own nuclear weapons? Is the internet going to destroy us? Will man be enslaved by machines?
You know, I never thought machines were that smart. I mean, most of the gadgets I have are incapable of doing anything useful at all, let alone reciting Shakespeare. But if we believe what some of the world's greatest minds are telling us, these things we've created are going to take us over, blow us up with our own weapons, and enslave us for the rest of time. Could that be possible? Not today, my friends.
Leading scientists believe machines are becoming so intelligent that they will overtake humans by 2050. Will they become Terminators and annihilate us? Noel Sharkey is a professor of artificial intelligence and robotics at the University of Sheffield, England. He says, we have nothing to worry about.
We're really a long way off at the moment of creating the kind of technology you see in the likes of the Terminator, with big humanoid robots armed with machine guns plodding across the battlefield.
Some of the world's greatest minds disagree, but Sharkey believes they haven't asked one simple question. Why?
And as a scientist, I need evidence, and there's no evidence of any kind of really smart intelligence or any kind of desire, or robots would have a desire to take over the world, any more than a washing machine would want to take over the world.
Not only does Sharkey think that machines aren't a threat, but they're not nearly as smart as we make them out to be.
A lot of people talk about artificial intelligence at the moment being at the level of the rat or the slug, and it's going to get so much smarter and be like the human later. But for me, I've studied animals all my life, really, and I would say that current robots weren't at the intelligence of a bacteria, because bacteria can feed themselves and they know how to survive. Robots don't. They're dependent on me. And essentially, they're not bright enough to be called stupid.
But even if robots and computers are nothing more than digital dummies, couldn't someone use them for evil rather than good?
Well, the problem is that robots are very limited in what they can do. You just program a robot, but it's all up to what the programmer puts in there. There's no reason why the robot themselves would do anything that we haven't told them to do. And I certainly wouldn't be programming a robot to tell it to take over the world, and I don't think anybody else would.
Instead of creatures with a super intelligence that surpasses humans, Sharkey thinks machines are our moronic slaves that lack the one essential ingredient for a robot-led Armageddon: human emotion.
We have consciousness, and we use that in our everyday lives, in our thought, in our desires. Whereas robots have a really rigid silicon intelligence, no desires, no wants.
But if robots have neither the brains nor the drive for world domination, why do so many others believe it will happen?
The whole idea of a robot takeover is quite odd, and it's really the subject of science fiction. Right back since the word was invented in 1921, all science fiction movies have been about robots killing humans and taking over the world. But it is, as it says, fiction. One of my big concerns at the minute is that there are 43 countries worldwide that are developing military robots. And one of the problems is the military seem to have this idea, science fiction idea of robots, that they could be have that kind of intelligence. But in actual fact, they can't tell the difference between a soldier and a civilian. And so a lot of people will die. But it won't be through the intentions of robots. It'll be through the misuse by humans of a dangerous weapon.
Are robots just mindless heaps of metal? Or will man and machine merge and destroy the human race? We'll just have to wait and find out. Weird or what? So there we have it. Doomsday stories from the Earth and beyond. In Wyoming, a deadly supervolcano lies dormant. Will it explode in 2012 and fulfill a Mayan prophecy? In Alabama, a NASA scientist discovers the unthinkable. A giant solar storm could be on its way to destroy the Earth. And one of the world's greatest minds makes a startling prediction. Man and machine will merge by 2050. Will robots take over? Are we facing a Terminator Armageddon? Are these stories evidence that the end of the world is nigh? Can we dismiss those who claim these things are true? You decide. Join me again next time for more stories that will undoubtedly be weird or what?